My wife, Sergeant Ava Hayes Cole, stepped over the blood pooling beneath me and called for a medic to follow her to the man she used to love. Ryan Mercer was sitting upright with nothing more than a shallow cut above his eyebrow, yet she looked at me as if I were the one causing problems. While she rushed toward him, I quietly pressed 2 fingers against the recorder hidden inside my jacket and sent the first recording to Internal Affairs before she even reached his side. Marlo Pharmacy reeked of rubbing alcohol, spilled cough syrup, and gunpowder. A display shelf had crashed beside me, scattering boxes of cold medicine across the floor. Behind the counter, a woman sobbed into her hands. The suspect was already handcuffed near the entrance, face down on the floor with 2 patrol officers keeping him pinned. My shirt was soaked with blood around my ribs. I stayed perfectly still because every movement sent another wave of pain through my body. Ava dropped to her knees beside Ryan. "Ryan, look at me. Stay with me." Ryan reached up, lightly gripping her sleeve as though he were dying on a battlefield. "Ava," he whispered, "I knew you'd come." I watched her wrap her fingers around his hand. Then she glanced at me. For just a second, she recognized what she was looking at. Her husband bleeding on the floor. Then her expression turned cold, the same detached look she wore at every crime scene. "Ethan, don't make this harder," she said. "The officers are handling it." The paramedic rushed in carrying a trauma bag. I managed to lift one hand. "Here." Before he could reach me, Ava snapped, "Check Ryan first." He took a blow to the head. The paramedic hesitated, looking from Ryan to me. By then, the blood had already reached my belt. "Sergeant," he said carefully, "this man is actively bleeding." Ava never even looked at my wound. "He's conscious and talking," she replied. "Ryan could have a concussion. Move." Ryan lowered his eyes toward me and smiled just enough that only I could see it. "Sorry, Ethan," he murmured. "She always comes when I call." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned my wrist. Beneath my cuff, my smartwatch screen lit up. The recording had been running ever since the first police sirens arrived. 10 minutes earlier, Ryan had burst into the pharmacy with a masked man chasing him. Before he yelled for help, he shouted my wife's name. He knew Ava was on duty. He had called her before calling 911. When the suspect panicked, Ryan grabbed the cashier and pulled her in front of himself as a shield. I shoved the terrified woman behind the counter just as the attacker lunged. The knife meant for her sank into my side instead. That was why I was lying on the floor. That was how my wife found us. And that was the moment I realized 5 years of marriage meant less to her than a promise she'd made to Ryan long before I ever came into her life. After another second, the paramedic ignored Ava's orders and came straight to me. "I said Ryan first," Ava shouted. Without responding, the paramedic cut open my shirt with trauma shears. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "I'm treating the more serious injury." Ava stood up. "You don't understand the scene." "No," I said through shallow breaths. "But the recorder does." For the first time since entering the pharmacy, she truly looked at me. Not at the blood. Not at my wound. She looked at my hand, then my smartwatch, and finally at the small black recorder clipped inside my torn jacket. Her lips parted. Ryan noticed it too and tightened his grip on her wrist. "Ethan," Ava said quietly, "turn that off." I ignored her and looked at the paramedic instead. "Please note the time," I said, "and note that I asked for medical assistance before Sergeant Hayes Cole ordered you to treat someone else." The paramedic's expression changed. It wasn't fear. It was the look of someone who understood exactly what proper documentation meant. "Time is 8:42 p.m., he said. Ava stepped toward me. "Don't do this here." "You already did." Her jaw tightened. Ryan slowly pushed himself upright, putting on far more of a performance than his tiny cut deserved. "Ava," he said, "he's upset. He's twisting everything." I looked directly at him. "You were conscious enough to flirt." His smile disappeared. "Ethan, stop," Ava said. I did. Not because she asked me to. Because my recorder vibrated against my wrist. The upload had finished. Internal Affairs had received the first file. Ava never noticed the notification. She was still too busy choosing Ryan. A second paramedic arrived and finally examined him. I heard every word. Minor laceration. Pupils equal. Stable. Ryan tried to interrupt, but the medic shook his head. "You can ride with us for evaluation," he said, pointing toward me. "But he goes first." For a moment, Ava actually looked offended, as though basic emergency triage had somehow betrayed her. Near the entrance, the patrol officers stopped pretending they weren't listening. One of the officers, a young patrolman named Brooks, looked from Ava to me. He knew who I was. Most of the precinct did. I was the husband who brought dinner during double shifts, fixed corrupted audio files for court subpoenas, and never caused trouble. Tonight, I had become evidence. The paramedics carefully lifted me onto the stretcher. A burst of pain exploded behind my eyes. Ava reached toward me. "Ethan," she said quietly, "we'll talk at the hospital." I caught her wrist before she could touch me. Her skin was warm. Mine was covered in blood. "No." She froze. It was a small word, but it hit harder than any shout. Her eyes searched mine. "What?" "No," I repeated. "You're not riding with me. You're not speaking for me. And you're not touching my medical records." "That's absurd," she said. "I'm your wife. Not in that ambulance." Behind her, Ryan let out a quiet laugh. "Come on, Ethan," he said. "Don't punish her for doing her job." I turned my head toward him. "You were her job." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Ava stepped between us. "That's enough. You're hurt and you're emotional. I'm not going to let you destroy my career because you're jealous." There it was. The word she chose while I was still lying in my own blood. Jealous. Not wounded. Not abandoned. Not betrayed. Jealous. The paramedics began rolling my stretcher toward the exit. I looked at Ava one last time before leaving the pharmacy. "You should have secured the scene," I said. "You should have treated the most serious injury first. You should have preserved witness statements. And you should have reported your personal conflict of interest. You did none of that." The color drained from her face. Then I added quietly, "And you said every bit of it on tape." The ambulance doors shut before she could answer. Inside, the medic started in 4 and pressed thick gauze firmly against my side. "You really sent that recording to Internal Affairs?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once. "Good." As the ambulance pulled away, I stared at the lights passing across the ceiling. My phone buzzed from the pocket the paramedics had cut off my jacket. A message from Ava appeared on the crack screen. "Don't make this official. We're husband and wife." I watched the words until the screen went dark. Then another message arrived. It was from Ryan. "You lost tonight. Don't embarrass yourself any further." I handed the phone to the paramedic. "Can you unlock it?" He held it in front of my face, and Face ID opened it. I tapped my attorney's contact. Mara answered on the second ring. "Ethan, my wife left me bleeding at an active crime scene so she could protect Ryan Mercer," I said. "The recording has already been sent to Internal Affairs. I need preservation notices issued tonight. Dispatch logs, body camera footage, EMS records, pharmacy surveillance, hospital intake. Everything." There was a brief pause. When Mara spoke again, her voice was calm, focused, and all business. "Understood. Don't speak to your wife without me. Don't sign anything." Then she asked the question I already knew was coming. "Do you want divorce counsel involved?" I looked down at the blood smeared across my palm. "Yes." Before we reached the hospital, Ava called me 3 times. I declined every call. By the time they wheeled me into the trauma unit, my first move had already been made. Ava still believed she could walk into my hospital room, call me jealous, and make everything disappear. She arrived about 40 minutes later. Ryan came with her. He had a tiny white bandage over his eyebrow, a fresh hoodie, and my wife's hand resting on his elbow as though he might collapse from the unbearable weight of his own performance. I was lying in a curtained treatment bay with 6 stitches under my ribs. A police officer stood outside because I was both the victim and an official witness. Without asking permission, Ava pulled the curtain aside. "Leave us," she told the officer. He didn't move. Her eyes narrowed. "Brooks." Officer Brooks shifted his weight. He was young, but he wasn't stupid. "Sergeant, hospital security instructed me to stay until Mr. Cole gives his statement." "I'm his wife," Ava replied, "and I'm involved in this incident." The words hung in the air. Her shoulders stiffened. Before she could say anything else, Ryan stepped forward. "Ethan," he said with a smile, looking first at Brooks and then at me. "Do you hear how ridiculous this sounds? Ava saved lives tonight, and you're turning it into some kind of soap opera." I glanced at the tiny bandage on his forehead. Did the pharmacy run out of smaller bandages? His smile faded instantly. Ava stepped closer, lowering her voice into the calm, controlled tone she always used when she wanted obedience without drawing attention. "You're going to tell Internal Affairs this was all a misunderstanding." "No. You're in pain. You misunderstood what happened." "No," she continued. "You don't understand. Those were operational decisions." I turned my head toward Brooks. "Officer Brooks, please note that Sergeant Hayes Cole is attempting to influence my statement before my attorney arrives." Brooks swallowed hard. Ava looked at me as if I'd just slapped her across the face. "Ethan, you wanted official language?" I said calmly. "There it is." Ryan stepped to the foot of my hospital bed, resting both hands on the rail like he owned the room. "You know what this is really about?" he said. "You've never gotten over the fact that Ava and I have history." I looked straight at him. "You mean the history you keep bringing into my marriage?" "Don't start," Ava snapped. "I didn't," I replied. "You brought him into my hospital room." I looked from her to Ryan. "He was part of the incident." Then I added quietly, "He was part of the betrayal." For the first time, Ava seemed to notice the room around her. Brooks was still standing by the door. A nurse was pretending to organize medication at her cart. An elderly man in the next bay suddenly became very interested in the television he wasn't watching. Her professional mask slipped back into place. "Ryan, wait outside." He frowned. "Ava." "Outside." This time he listened. But before leaving, he leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "You know she'll forgive me before she ever forgives you." I reached for my phone. Ava immediately noticed. "Are you recording again?" "Yes." Her mouth opened in disbelief. I unlocked the screen and placed the phone on the blanket between us. "You're a police sergeant standing in my hospital room discussing an active internal affairs complaint," I said. "Assume everything is being recorded." For a moment, anger flashed across her face. Then I saw something else. Fear. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I need you to sign this." I took it. It wasn't hospital paperwork. It wasn't a victim statement. It was a typed narrative. Before I even read it, I recognized the format. Supplemental Witness Clarification. My name was already printed beneath the signature line. I read the opening paragraph. "Ethan Cole acknowledges that Sergeant Ava Hayes Cole acted according to department training and did not deny or delay medical assistance. From her position, his injuries appeared less urgent. He further acknowledges that his emotional response was influenced by his marital relationship with Sergeant Hayes Cole and his personal discomfort with Ryan Mercer." I laughed. The pain in my ribs turned it into a short, ugly sound. "You actually wrote my jealousy into an official police document." "It protects everyone until the facts are clear," Ava replied. "It protects you. It protects my unit. It protects the case." Then she hesitated before adding, "It protects Ryan." Her eyes flashed. Ryan was a victim too. I looked at her. He grabbed the cashier and used her as a shield. He was scared. He pulled that woman in front of himself when the suspect charged. "You don't know what you saw. I recorded exactly what I saw." She pushed the document toward me again. "Sign it tonight. We'll handle the rest. Privately." There it was again. Privately. That was where she wanted everything to stay. Every betrayal. Every humiliation. Every lie. Behind closed doors she could call betrayal stress. Behind closed doors, she could make me look like the unreasonable husband. Behind closed doors, she could remain the hero. I picked up the paper. Ava exhaled, convinced I had finally given in. Instead, I tore it cleanly down the middle. Then I tore both halves again. Without another word, I dropped the pieces into the plastic waste basin beside my bed. She stared silently. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning up some private confusion." I froze the discretionary company card attached to my business account. The same card Ava used for late-night meals, dry cleaning, gas, department fundraisers. And every temporary expense Ryan somehow managed to create whenever he was around. A second later, Ava's phone buzzed. She looked down. Her expression changed. Transaction permissions changed. She slowly looked back at me. "You froze my card." "No. I froze my company card. You gave it to me. For meals during long shifts. Not for Ryan's hotel rooms. Not for his ride shares. And definitely not for his consulting lunches." Her grip tightened around her phone. "That's not what those charges were." "Good. Then the audit will prove it." She blinked. "Audit?" "My attorney already requested every statement." She stared at me as though she'd walked into her own house and found all the furniture gone. Just then, the nurse returned with my discharge paperwork. Ava reached for it automatically. "I'll take those." The nurse pulled the papers back. "I'm sorry. Mr. Cole specifically requested that no medical information be released to Sergeant Hayes Cole." Very slowly, Ava turned toward me. "You removed me. You removed yourself at the pharmacy." The fluorescent lights reflected off the badge on her chest. For the first time, it didn't look like a symbol of authority. It looked like a piece of metal waiting to be taken away. The curtain opened again. Ryan stepped back inside. "Ava, can we go? Reporters are outside." I looked at him. "Reporters?" Ava's jaw tightened. Ryan shrugged. "Someone leaked that a decorated sergeant saved me from a knife attack." I watched Ava carefully. She didn't look surprised, only annoyed that I'd heard it. "You're letting him turn this into a publicity stunt while I was lying here getting stitched up." "It's not like that," Ava said. I picked up one of the torn halves of the statement and held it in front of her. "It is exactly like that." Before she could respond, my attorney arrived. Mara walked in wearing a charcoal coat and carrying a worn leather folder. She took one look around the room, taking in Ava's uniform, Ryan's neatly bandaged forehead, the torn statement on my bed, and me sitting there with fresh stitches. Her expression never changed. "Sergeant Hayes Cole," she said calmly. "Mr. Mercer." Neither of them spoke. "You are not to contact my client regarding his statement, his medical records, his recordings, or his complaint except through legal counsel." Ava's eyes widened. "Mara, he's my husband." Mara opened her folder without looking away. "Then you should never have handed your medicated husband a pre-written statement to sign." Ryan shook his head. "This is insane." Mara turned toward him. "Mr. Mercer, I also have a preservation notice requesting that your clothing, phone records, and all communications with Sergeant Hayes Cole before and after tonight's incident be preserved." The small bandage couldn't hide the tension that spread across his forehead. "My phone." "Yes." Ava immediately stepped in. "Ryan isn't under investigation." Mara's eyes settled on the badge pinned to Ava's chest. "Not by me." The words landed harder than either of them expected. Ava's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her captain. For a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, she looked at me. There wasn't an ounce of regret in her eyes. Only accusation. "How dare you?" That was the message written across her face. "How dare you make my choices have consequences?" I leaned back against the pillow. "Take the call, Sergeant." Calling her by her title sounded different now. More distant. She answered, "Captain." Even from where I sat, I could hear the sharp, controlled voice coming through the speaker. Ava turned slightly away, but the room wasn't large enough to keep the conversation private. "Yes, sir. I understand." "No, sir. I haven't spoken to Internal Affairs yet." I'm still at the hospital. Yes, with him. She closed her eyes. Beside her, Ryan whispered, What? She lowered the phone. Her hand was no longer steady. I've been ordered to submit my body camera footage and my incident notes before midnight. Mara clicked her pen. Good. She closed the folder. Then everyone still has time to tell the truth. Ryan looked at Ava. Ava looked at me. I didn't look away. The first consequence had finally arrived. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But it was enough for Ava to realize I was no longer the man who quietly cleaned up the blood so she could keep walking over it. Mara drove me away from the hospital a little after midnight. I refused to let Ava anywhere near my discharge papers. We didn't go home. We went to my office. She didn't know I'd already changed the access code. The building was dark except for the blue security light glowing above the evidence vault. The words Cole Certified Records were printed plainly across the glass entrance. No gold lettering. No marble lobby. No oversized logo. Just servers, storage, timestamps, signatures, and the kind of boring paperwork that destroys people who lie. Mara helped me into the conference room. You should be resting. I will. When? After the uploads. She gave me a look but opened her laptop anyway. That was one of the reasons I trusted Mara. She argued once. Then she got to work. I connected my phone, my smartwatch, the dashcam backup, the digital recorder. Every file was copied into the secure archive. Hash values were generated. Timestamps were locked. Chain of custody was established. Evidence labels began printing one after another. The quiet office filled with the soft clicking of the label printer. Pharmacy Audio 01. Smartwatch emergency capture. Dashcam exterior angle. Ryan Mercer text message. Ava Hayes Cole hospital contact attempt. Pre-written statement photograph. Mara looked up. You kept the torn pieces? They were in the hospital waste basin. I asked the nurse to bag them. For the first time all night, Mara almost smiled. That might be the most Ethan thing you've ever done. It was evidence. She nodded. It was also your marriage. I looked through the clear evidence bag. My own name was printed beneath words I had never spoken. No, I said quietly. That was evidence too. By 2:15 a.m. the first preservation notices had been sent. To the pharmacy owner. To the hospital. To EMS. To dispatch. To the police department. To Ryan Mercer. To Ava's department email. And to her personal email. Mara sent everyone with receipt tracking enabled. At 2:31 a.m. Ava called. 2:32, she called again. At 2:35, she finally sent a text. You're taking this beyond the point where it can be repaired. I replied with a single sentence. You left repair on the pharmacy floor. Then I blocked her number. From that point on, every communication would go through Mara. She watched me do it. Good. The word carried more weight than comfort. It sounded final. At 3:10 a.m. the office intercom buzzed. I checked the security camera. Ryan Mercer was standing outside the front door, still wearing the same hoodie. The bright white bandage on his forehead almost glowed under the security light. Ava wasn't with him. Mara looked at the monitor. Well, that was fast. Ryan pressed the buzzer again. I reached over and switched on the speaker. It's late, Ryan. He looked up at the security camera. Open the door. No. We need to talk man to man. You should try becoming one first. The charm disappeared from his face. You really think files and lawyers make you strong? I think they make you traceable. He stepped closer to the camera. Ava was mine before she was ever yours. I said nothing. You were useful, he continued. Stable. A safe house with a wedding ring. But when things get ugly, she always comes back to me. He smiled. You saw that tonight. I didn't answer. He wanted anger. Instead, I gave him silence. And a permanent recording. Ryan pulled out his phone. I can make your life ugly. My company works with police contracts. I replied. He nodded. Exactly. How long do you think those contracts last when every officer in this city believes you're just a bitter husband trying to destroy a sergeant? Before I could respond, Mara leaned toward the intercom. Mr. Mercer, this is Mara Vass, legal counsel for Ethan Cole. Ryan froze. Thank you for confirming an attempt to intimidate a witness. If you'd like, please remain exactly where you are while we contact the police. For the first time all night, Ryan took a step backward. He looked at the building as if it had suddenly grown teeth. This isn't over. No, I said. It just became official. He turned and walked away. Mara immediately saved the intercom recording and submitted it to Internal Affairs as supplemental evidence. Around 4 in the morning, I finally sat alone in my office with the lights turned off. My side throbbed beneath the fresh stitches. My phone showed 37 unread notifications. Most of them came from the same group chat Ava had created years earlier. Blue Family and Friends. It had started as a joke. The group included Ava's precinct friends, my friends, her parents, her younger brother, 2 cousins. And Ryan after he moved back to town. I opened the chat. Ryan had posted first. Rough night. Grateful Ava was there. Some people panic in emergencies and blame the ones holding everything together. Ava never corrected him. Her mother replied with praying hands. Her brother wrote, Ethan always hated Ryan. Hope he doesn't turn this into an ego thing. One of the officers' wives added, Ava is one of the best cops I know. People need to respect the job. I watched the messages continue. Every single one built on the same lie. I didn't reply. Instead, I exported the entire chat. Then I removed my profile picture. Then I quietly left the group. 30 seconds later, Ava sent Mara an email. Subject: Tell Ethan to stop acting childish. Mara read it aloud without changing her expression. Inside, Ava described me as emotionally unstable. She claimed I was humiliated by the presence of an old friend. She accused me of weaponizing a workplace incident because of marital insecurity. Mara looked up. Workplace incident. I nodded. She always uses those words when she wants to erase what happened at home. Mara's eyes sharpened. Then we'll make sure home stays part of the record. By sunrise, the Internal Affairs complaint was complete. Conflict of interest. Failure to provide aid based on medical priority. Attempting to influence a witness. Preparing a false written narrative. Possible report manipulation. And maintaining a personal relationship with someone directly involved in the incident. Mara slid the final page across the table. Once you file this, there's no taking it back. I signed without hesitation. My hand never shook. At exactly 8 a.m., the complaint was officially filed. At 8:17, Captain Dorsey called Mara instead of me. At 8:42, Ava's body camera was confiscated for review. At 9:05, Ryan received the preservation notice for his phone. At 9:13, Ava tried to unlock the front door of our house. The smart lock denied her. 2 minutes later, she called Mara. With my permission, Mara placed the call on speaker. Ava's voice echoed through the conference room. Why am I locked out of my own house? Mara answered calmly. The property was purchased by Mr. Cole before the marriage and is solely in his name. Because of the active complaint and your attempt to obtain a false statement, he has secured the residence. You may schedule a supervised time to collect your personal belongings. There was a long silence. Then Ava spoke again. Put Ethan on the phone. Mara looked at me. I slowly shook my head. My client is unavailable. Ava's voice cracked for the first time. He's my husband. Mara didn't hesitate. Then you should have treated him like your husband when he was bleeding. The line went dead. I looked through the glass wall of my office at the rows of locked archive shelves. Ava used to tease me about this place. Your little kingdom of receipts. She had meant it as a joke. Now I realized she had been right. It really was a kingdom built on receipts. And every gate was closed. 2 days after the stabbing, Ava's father invited me to dinner. It wasn't really an invitation. It was a summons. Patrick Hayes had retired as a police lieutenant years earlier. He was the kind of man who still polished his old service plaques and expected younger officers to lower their voices whenever they entered his kitchen. He liked me when I helped pay off Ava's academy loans. He admired me when I refinanced his medical bills after his stroke. As long as respect meant obedience, he had always respected me. Patrick Hayes' message came through Mara because Ava was still unable to contact me directly. Family dinner. Sunday at 6. We'll settle this before lawyers ruin everyone's lives. Mara advised me not to go. I went anyway, just not alone. A process server came with me and waited in his car outside. The Hayes house looked exactly as it always had. A white porch, a blue flag hanging beside the front door, Helen's rose bushes, neatly trimmed for winter. Ryan's black sedan parked in the driveway. Of course, Ava answered the door. She was wearing jeans and a cream-colored sweater. No uniform, no badge. For a brief moment, she looked like the woman who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after exhausting shifts. Then I noticed Ryan standing behind her. He was wearing my old precinct barbecue apron, the one embroidered with Ethan Grill Captain. He had tied it around his waist on purpose. Ryan smiled. "Hope you don't mind. Someone had to help." I looked at Ava. She was the first to look away. Inside, the dining room was already full. Patrick sat at the head of the table. Helen stood near the kitchen. Ava's brother, Mason, leaned against the wall. Two cousins sat nearby. Ryan was seated at Ava's right. My chair had been placed all the way at the opposite end of the table, near the hallway. I never sat down. Patrick tapped the table. "Sit down, Ethan." "No." The room immediately grew tense. Patrick frowned. "We're still family." "Then why is he wearing my apron?" Ryan lifted both hands. "Seriously." Ava sighed. "Ethan, don't start." I turned toward her. "You invited the man at the center of an active internal affairs investigation to a family meeting about that same investigation." Helen spoke before Ava could. "He's family too." That almost made me laugh. Ryan lowered his eyes with practiced humility. "I didn't even want to come. Ava insisted I shouldn't hide like I'd done something wrong." I pulled out my phone. Patrick slammed his palm against the table. "No recordings in my house." I met his stare. "Your daughter accused me of lying after leaving me bleeding in public. Your guest threatened my company on camera. Your family group chat called me jealous while I was lying in trauma care. I record everything now." Ava's face tightened. Mason pushed himself away from the wall. "You've always been dramatic for such a quiet guy." I opened the exported family group chat. I was quiet because I had receipts. Then I pressed play. Not the pharmacy recording. Not yet. A smaller one. Ryan standing outside my office. His voice filled every phone on the table. "Ava was mine before she was yours. You were useful. Stable. A safe house with a ring. But when things get ugly, she comes back to me. You saw that tonight." Helen covered her mouth. Mason slowly turned toward Ryan. Patrick's eyes narrowed. Ryan recovered quickly. "That's completely out of context." I played the second recording. His own voice echoed through the room. "You run a company that depends on police contracts. You really want every officer in this city believing you're the bitter husband trying to destroy a sergeant?" The atmosphere changed. Not enough for anyone to admit I was right. Just enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Ava stared at Ryan. "You went to his office?" Ryan spread his hands. "I was only trying to calm him down." I looked at Ava. "Did that sound calm?" She said nothing. Patrick pointed at me. "You had no right to bring this into my house. You invited me here to pressure me without legal counsel." I brought context. Ryan untied my apron and tossed it onto a chair. "This is pathetic. He's trying to make me look like the villain because Ava did her job." I reached into my folder and placed another document on the table. "Since you enjoy using my things." I looked directly at Ryan. "Let's talk about the SUV." For the first time all evening, his expression cracked. Ava turned toward me. "What SUV?" "The black Denali he drove here tonight. It belongs to Cole Certified Records. It was assigned to you for commuting and emergency department travel. I looked at Ryan. The GPS records show he's driven it 26 times over the last 6 weeks. Ava stood so quickly her chair scraped across the floor. Ryan. His jaw tightened. You told me it was fine. Ava stared at him. I told you that you could borrow it once while your car was in the shop. I pulled the spare key from my pocket. Standing by the window, I pressed the remote. Outside, the Denali chirped. A second later, I disabled the engine through the fleet management app. Ryan's phone buzzed. Everyone watched as he looked at the screen. His face told them what the message said before he opened his mouth. I spoke first. Vehicle access has been revoked. If you drive it again, it will be reported as stolen. Mason shook his head. Come on, Ethan. I looked at him. Your sister's former lover has been driving my company vehicle while telling everyone I'm nothing more than a jealous husband. Which part of that am I supposed to come on about? No one answered. Ava took a slow step toward me. Ethan. Her voice was quieter now. I didn't know he kept using it. No, I said. You stopped checking because checking would have made you responsible. Ava's hands slowly fell to her sides. I placed another envelope on the table. Patrick stared at it as though it might explode. What's that? A supervised property retrieval schedule. I looked at Ava. You can collect your personal belongings on Wednesday between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. My attorney and an independent witness will be present. Helen stood up. You're throwing your wife out? I met her eyes. She walked out of our marriage the moment she wrote that crime scene report. Ava's voice dropped to a whisper. This is cruel. I looked at her for a long moment. You told a paramedic to treat Ryan before me while I was bleeding on the floor. Cruel isn't a word you get to define tonight. Ryan grabbed his jacket. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I nodded toward the front window. You might want to call a rideshare. He frowned. What? Outside. The Denali sat motionless in the driveway. For once, Ryan was leaving without taking something that belonged to me. He stormed toward the front door. Before he reached it, the doorbell rang. Ava opened it automatically. A process server stood on the porch. Ryan Mercer? Ryan stopped cold. The server handed him a large envelope. You've been served. Ryan looked down at the papers. Mara had moved quickly. Civil preservation orders. A notice regarding possible witness intimidation. A demand to preserve records connected to his unauthorized use of my company vehicle. He looked from the paperwork to me. You're insane. No, I replied. I'm documented. Ava's eyes shifted to the second envelope still in my hand. She already knew it was for her. I held it out. Temporary separation notice. All future communication must go through legal counsel. She accepted it but didn't open it. Patrick slowly stood. You're going to ruin her. I looked at the retired lieutenant. The man who had spent his career teaching his daughter that a badge could soften consequences. No. She made those choices while wearing the uniform. I'm simply refusing to keep paying for them with my marriage. I left before dessert. Behind me, the voices grew louder. Ryan started shouting first. Patrick followed. Then Ava. Her voice was sharper than either of theirs. By the time I reached my car, the family group chat had gone completely silent. Ava had expected a dinner where everyone would make me feel small. Instead, Ryan walked away carrying legal papers. Ava stood there holding a separation notice. And my chair remained empty at the far end of the table. That was the first moment I saw something change in her. She finally understood something simple. I wasn't asking her to choose anymore. I'd already made my choice. Ava's first official report reached Internal Affairs on Monday. Mara read it aloud in my office. The wording was polished. Too polished. I could hear Ava's voice in the structure. But Ryan's influence was hidden inside every accusation. She read, Upon arrival, I observed my spouse, Ethan Cole, moving unpredictably within the scene. His emotional state appeared escalated due to pre-existing personal tension with civilian witness Ryan Mercer. My initial assessment was that Mr. Mercer presented possible head trauma. while Mr. Cole was alert, verbal, and mobile. EMS independently triaged both parties. Mara stopped reading. Mobile? I looked down at the stitches beneath my shirt. I was lying on the floor. She continued. Mr. Cole made multiple hostile remarks regarding my prior relationship with Mr. Mercer, creating concern that his later complaint may have been retaliatory in nature. There it was. Jealousy dressed up in official language. Ava had taken the accusation she'd thrown at me in the hospital and tried to turn it into legal protection. Mara lowered the report. She committed herself to the lie. I shook my head. No. She married it. My phone buzzed. Then again. And again. 3 different people sent me screenshots. Ryan had made a public post. The photo showed him in the hospital with the small bandage still on his forehead. Ava stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The caption read, "Some people run toward danger. Some people turn pain into blame. Forever grateful for the brave ones." He never mentioned my name. He didn't have to. The comments poured in. Sergeant Hayes is a hero. Ignore the bitter people. Old friends are real family. Some husbands just can't handle strong women. Then I noticed something else. Ava had liked the post. Not by accident. Not by misunderstanding. She had seen it. She had clicked it. She had publicly chosen a side. For the first time in months, I opened my own social media page. I didn't post accusations. I didn't argue. I wrote one sentence. I will not discuss an active internal affairs investigation online. All recordings, medical records, and witness evidence have been preserved through legal counsel. Then I closed the app. Ryan wanted a public fight. I gave him a locked filing cabinet instead. By noon, Ava's captain reassigned her to desk duty while the preliminary review was underway. 5 minutes later, she sent Mara a message. "He's destroying me. Tell him to take down whatever he posted." Mara forwarded it to me without adding a single comment. I replied with only 2 words. No response. At 3:02 that afternoon, 2 officers arrived at my office. They weren't from internal affairs. They were patrol. One of them was Brooks. The other was an older officer named Jensen. Before he even sat down, I could see the discomfort written across his face. "We just need to ask a few follow-up questions," Officer Jensen said. Mara leaned back in her chair beside me. "About what?" Jensen cleared his throat. "There are questions about possible obstruction at the pharmacy." I looked at Brooks. He couldn't meet my eyes. Mara's voice became noticeably sharper. "And who made that allegation?" Jensen hesitated. "Supplemental information suggests Mr. Cole may have interfered with Mr. Mercer's movement during the incident." I almost had to admire Ryan. He moved quickly. First, I was the jealous husband. Now I was accused of obstruction. By dinner, he'd probably find a way to blame me for the knife too. Without saying a word, Mara slid a folder across the table. "Before my client answers any questions, I'd like you to review this." Jensen opened it. Inside were still images taken from the pharmacy's security cameras. Ryan entering the store first. Ryan grabbing the cashier. The suspect lunging with the knife. Me shoving the cashier behind the counter. The blade striking my side. Ryan stumbling backward, away from both of us. The sequence was clear. Nothing dramatic. Just the truth. Jensen's ears turned red. Brooks looked at the photos, then at me. "I didn't know there was video." "That's exactly why people should think twice before turning lies into official paperwork," Mara said. Jensen quietly closed the folder. "We'll update the inquiry." "No," Mara replied. "You'll also document exactly who made the obstruction allegation." Jensen looked at her. She didn't blink. "If that allegation came from Sergeant Hayes Cole or Mr. Mercer after preservation notices were served, it may constitute retaliation." Brooks finally spoke. "I'll make sure that's included." After they left, Mara immediately sent another supplemental notice to Internal Affairs. Possible retaliatory allegation. Supporting video attached. Around 5:30 that evening, Ava appeared outside my office. She couldn't come inside. She stood behind the locked glass door with her hair pulled back and her jacket zipped all the way to her neck. Without unrestricted access, she looked smaller somehow. I switched on the intercom. "You need to leave." She looked up at the security camera. "Please." Once that word would have mattered. Not anymore. "I can't talk to you directly." "Then just listen. Ryan made that post without asking me. You liked it." Her mouth tightened. "I was trying to calm him down. You keep calling obedience calm." She glanced over her shoulder at the empty sidewalk, clearly embarrassed to be standing there. "My captain took me off field duty. My father is furious. Ryan says you're trying to ruin him financially." She looked back at the camera. "What do you want?" "Accountability." She shook her head. "No." Her voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." She flinched. "Most people think hate is the opposite of love. It isn't. Nothing is." Ava slowly placed her hand against the glass. "I made a bad call. You made several. I was scared for Ryan. You saw blood on his face. You saw blood all over my shirt." She closed her eyes. "I thought you were stronger." There it was. The quietest insult. And the oldest one. She believed I could carry more pain simply because I always had. I paid the bills without complaining. I smoothed things over with her parents. I made excuses whenever Ryan called in the middle of the night. I slept alone when she said he needed her after a difficult day. I was the strong one, strong enough to be left behind. Ryan was the fragile one, fragile enough to keep taking. I leaned closer to the intercom. "You mistook my endurance for permission." Her hand slowly slid down the glass. Behind me, Mara walked out of the conference room. "Ethan." I turned toward her. "The department scheduled the preliminary internal affairs review." "When?" "Friday morning." Ava heard every word through the speaker. Her eyes opened. "Mara's there." "Yes." Her expression hardened again. That was always her pattern. Shame turned into anger before it could become honesty. "You're letting a lawyer control our marriage." I looked at her through the reflection in the office glass. "No. You let Ryan control it. Mara is simply closing the file." Ava took one step back. "I'm not going to lose my career because my husband got hurt." "You won't lose your career because I got hurt." I held her gaze. "You'll lose it if the recordings prove you lied." She didn't answer. Her phone rang. She looked down at the screen. "Ryan." She answered immediately, still standing outside my office. I couldn't hear what he was saying. I didn't need to. I watched her face change. First annoyance, then concern, then that familiar softness. She turned away from me. "I'm coming," she said. I saved the security footage. Not because I needed another reminder that she'd chosen him. I already knew that. I saved it because every betrayal deserves a timestamp. The department never canceled the commendation ceremony. That was the first sign they cared more about protecting their image than protecting the truth. Ava was scheduled to receive a bravery commendation for a domestic violence rescue she had handled weeks earlier. It had nothing to do with the pharmacy incident. The ceremony had been planned long before any of this happened. Families would attend. Donors. Local reporters. City council members. A polished stage stood beneath rows of flags. Neatly arranged chairs filled the hall. Ryan arrived as Ava's guest. I attended because Internal Affairs asked me to remain available for follow-up questions. Mara came because she didn't trust any room filled with badges and microphones. Ava spotted me near the back entrance, and her expression tightened. Ryan leaned close and whispered something in her ear. He was dressed in a navy suit, wearing the confident smile of a man already imagining the photographs that would be taken after the ceremony. His hand rested on the small of her back. My wife didn't move away. Mara noticed it too. "You need a minute?" she asked quietly. "No." Across the hall, Captain Dorsey was speaking with two Internal Affairs investigators. One of them, Lieutenant Maribel Chun, held a tablet under her arm. She looked at me, then at Ava, then at Ryan. Her face showed no admiration. "Good." The ceremony began at 10 o'clock. The chief stepped to the podium and spoke about honor, public trust, and the responsibility that came with wearing a badge. Ava sat in the front row. Ryan sat beside her. Patrick sat 2 seats away, his jaw tight with equal parts family pride and private anger. Helen was already dabbing tears from her eyes before anything had even happened. When Ava's name appeared in the printed program, she lifted her chin. That was the version of her the city knew. Sergeant Ava Hayes Cole. Decorated. Composed. Brave. The officer who ran toward danger. The same officer who had stepped over her bleeding husband to kneel beside Ryan. The chief reached the section where commendations were presented. He looked down at the list. Just before he announced Ava's name, Lieutenant Chun walked onto the stage and leaned over to whisper in his ear. The chief stopped speaking. A quiet pause spread through the room. Programs rustled. People exchanged confused looks. Ava's shoulders stiffened. Ryan's hand froze halfway to adjusting his tie. The chief glanced down again. Then he skipped Ava's name entirely. Instead, he called the next officer. Ava didn't move, but I saw her fingers tighten around the edge of her chair. Patrick leaned toward her. "What the hell?" Ryan whispered something to her. Before the ceremony was over, Ava stood. Lieutenant Chun was already waiting near the hallway. "Sergeant Hayes Cole," she said. "We need you to come with us." Ava forced a polite smile. "Now?" "Yes." Ryan stood beside her. Chun turned toward him. "You as well, Mr. Mercer." Ryan blinked. "For what?" "I'm not department personnel." "No," Chun replied calmly. "You're a civilian witness under a preservation notice, and your name appears in multiple statements." Mara lightly touched my arm. "That's our cue." We followed at a distance. Not into the interview room. Into a nearby conference room with glass walls and half-closed blinds. Inside, Internal Affairs had gathered everything Ava had hoped would never be seen together. The dispatch log, the EMS timeline, the pharmacy surveillance video, body camera footage, hospital records, the audio recordings from my devices, Ryan's public social media post, Ava's official report, and the pre-written statement she had brought to my hospital room. Lieutenant Chun started with the dispatch log. Emergency call received at 8:31 p.m. First patrol unit arrived at 8:39. Sergeant Hayes Cole arrived at 8:41. EMS entered the scene at 8:42. She tapped her tablet. EMS notes state: active bleeding from Ethan Cole. Minor superficial laceration to Ryan Mercer. No loss of consciousness observed. Ryan shifted in his chair. That medic barely looked at me. Chun looked directly at him. He did. On camera. She played the EMS body camera footage. The room filled with the sounds from the pharmacy. My breathing. Ava's voice. Check him after Ryan. Then the paramedic's response. Sergeant. This man is actively bleeding. Ava's jaw tightened. Ryan stared down at the table. Chun paused the video. Sergeant Hayes Cole. Your report states that EMS independently triaged both parties without any direction from you. Ava answered carefully. That was my recollection. Beside me, Mara quietly wrote something in her notebook. Chun tapped the screen again. Another clip played. Ava's own voice echoed through the room. I said Ryan first. Silence followed. Chun turned toward Ryan. Mr. Mercer, your public statement claims Sergeant Hayes Cole saved you from a knife attack. Ryan straightened in his chair. She did. Without responding, Chun opened the pharmacy surveillance footage. There was no audio, only movement. Ryan backing away, the cashier being pulled in front of him. Me moving toward them, the knife flashing. The cashier falling safely behind the counter. Me collapsing onto the floor. Ryan untouched except for striking a display shelf. Chun froze the image on the exact frame where Ryan's hand gripped the cashier's sleeve. She looked at him. Is this you using the cashier as a shield? Ryan immediately stood. That's an outrageous accusation. Chen never changed her expression. Sit down. After a brief hesitation, he sat. Ava stared at the frozen image. Something in her face finally cracked. It wasn't remorse. Not yet. It was something even harder for her. Realization. She hadn't been watching the scene. She had only been watching Ryan. Chun picked up another document and slid it across the table. Sergeant Hayes Cole, did you prepare this statement for Mr. Cole to sign while he was in the hospital? Ava looked down at the photograph of the torn statement. Her voice dropped. I was trying to prevent a misunderstanding. For the first time since the meeting began, Mara spoke. By drafting a statement admitting jealousy for a patient who was medicated and recovering from a stab wound, the chief stood silently near the window. He didn't defend her. He didn't interrupt. His silence wasn't protection anymore. It was distance. Ava noticed. She turned toward him. Chief. He never answered. Lieutenant Chun continued. Pending the outcome of this investigation, Sergeant Ava Hayes Cole, you are hereby placed on administrative leave. She paused before finishing. You will surrender your duty weapon and your badge to Captain Dorsey immediately. The room fell completely silent. Ava stared at Lieutenant Chun. This is only preliminary. Yes, Chun replied. My commendation. It's been postponed. Ryan leaned toward her. Ava, don't hand over anything until your union representative gets here. Chun looked at him. You should consider getting legal counsel too. The meaning didn't sink in right away. When it did, Ryan's expression changed. Slowly, Ava reached for her badge. I'd watched her take it off hundreds of times at home. Every night she dropped it into the ceramic dish by the front door. Every morning she pinned it back onto her uniform with the same calm, practiced motion. This time was different. Her thumb lingered over the badge number. She held it a second longer than she needed to. Then she laid it on the table. Metal touched wood. It made a small sound. It marked a very big ending. Next came her service weapon. Captain Dorsey signed the receipt without saying a word. Ava looked up. Through the glass wall our eyes met. For the first time since the pharmacy, she didn't look angry. She looked exposed. Ryan jumped to his feet. This is because of him, he shouted, pointing through the glass at me. He has a vendetta. Chun turned toward him. No, Mr. Mercer. This is happening because recordings have timestamps. Mara leaned toward me. Stage 1. I nodded. It wasn't victory. Not yet. Ava walked out of the room without a badge on her belt. The reporters waiting in the hallway immediately turned toward her. They had come expecting photos of a decorated officer receiving an award. Instead, they watched a sergeant leave under internal affairs escort. Ryan tried to walk beside her. Lieutenant Chun stopped him. Separate interviews. Ava looked back at Ryan. It was the first time she'd looked at him since the pharmacy. He didn't reach for her. He was too busy searching for the nearest exit. Administrative leave changed Ava. The first thing it took away was her authority. The second was her certainty. 3 days after the ceremony, Mara forwarded me an email from Ava. I want to speak to my husband, not his attorney. I replied with one word. No. 2 minutes later, another email arrived. Please, just 10 minutes. No lawyers. Again, my answer was the same. No. An hour later, a third message appeared. Ryan is falling apart. My department is turning against me. My father won't even look at me. I need you. I stared at those last 3 words. I need you. I'd waited years to hear them without Ryan standing somewhere between us. Now they had finally come. Only they were wrapped in consequences. I never answered. Instead, I met Mara at the county courthouse. The divorce petition was ready. Irreconcilable differences. Legal separation beginning on the night of the pharmacy incident. Exclusive possession of my premarital home. A financial restraining order. Preservation of records. Civil claims reserved. Mara placed a pen beside the papers. Are you sure? I looked down at the petition. Marriage had always been marked by signatures. The marriage license. The mortgage paperwork. Emergency contact forms. Tax returns. Anniversary cards. Handwritten apologies. Now there was this. One more signature. This one closed a door instead of opening one. I signed at noon. Ava was served outside the union office. She called Mara before the process server had even reached his car. Mara answered on speaker in my office. Ava. Her breathing was uneven. He filed for divorce. Yes. Put him on. No. Put my husband on the phone. Mara looked at me. I nodded. Just once. I wanted Ava to hear my voice one final time. I took the phone. I slept beside you, I said quietly. Ryan lived between us. Silence. Then her voice softened. Ethan. No emotional phone calls. No private meetings. No statements. No access to the house without scheduling. Everything from now on goes through legal counsel. You can't end 5 years like this. I didn't. I heard her catch her breath. I made one mistake at the scene. You made a choice at the scene. Then you filed a false report. You brought a prepared statement to my hospital bed. You supported a public lie. And you let Ryan smear my name. I paused. Which one of those was the mistake? I was trying to protect my career. You protected Ryan first. He needed me. So did I. The words landed, but they didn't change anything. Ava whispered, I'm sorry. I looked at the copy of the divorce petition lying on my desk. You're sorry now because your badge is sitting on someone else's table. No, that's not fair. I answered without raising my voice. Fair was the paramedic treating the man who was bleeding. You argued with that too. Something changed in her voice. The panic finally surfaced. Do you want me to cut Ryan out of my life? Is that what you want? I can do that. I'll tell him we need some space. For a moment, I almost closed my eyes. Need some space. Even now, she spoke about Ryan as if he were someone she might return to later. No, I don't want you pretending to be loyal after the consequences arrived. I took a slow breath. Keep him. Leave him. Marry him. Blame him. I don't care anymore. That's not true. It's becoming true. She fell silent. That silence scared her more than if I had yelled. I handed the phone back to Mara. She ended the call. By that evening, Ryan made his next move. He filed a formal complaint with my biggest private client, a regional law firm. In it, he accused my company of misusing law enforcement materials for personal retaliation. He copied 3 attorneys, Ava's union representative, and an assistant city manager. The complaint looked official. It sounded convincing. It was also incredibly foolish. Not because Ryan was unintelligent. Because he didn't understand how my business actually worked. My company never stored police evidence without authorization. We handled materials provided by private clients, attorneys, witnesses, and civil litigants. My recordings belonged to me. My medical records belonged to me. The security footage from my office belonged to me. Every file I submitted to Internal Affairs had a documented chain of custody and a legal submission receipt. I forwarded Ryan's complaint to Mara. She answered it with a single response. Attached were 7 supporting documents, 2 contract clauses, 3 chain of custody certifications, a defamation notice, and a demand requiring Ryan to preserve every communication related to his accusation. 20 minutes later, the law firm replied, We have no concerns regarding Mr. Cole's compliance. We will not participate in personal retaliation. That ended Ryan's email campaign. Ava didn't know it yet. At 9 that night, my doorbell camera alerted me. Ava was standing outside my house. She was wearing the gray coat I'd bought her after her first promotion. A small overnight bag rested beside her feet. She rang the bell. I answered through the speaker. You're not scheduled. I don't have anywhere else to go tonight. Your parents' house. My father told me not to come back until I fixed this. Ryan's place. Her face tightened. That's cruel. No. It's accurate. She looked down the dark, empty street. I didn't know he sent that complaint to your client. You didn't stop him from making that public post either. I can't control everything he does. No. But you controlled every door you opened for him to walk into my life. Her hands slowly closed into fists. I said I was sorry. I know. I filed for divorce. She looked up at the camera. Are you really throwing away 5 years because of one night? I answered quietly. No. I'm ending a marriage because one night finally revealed the truth. Her lips trembled. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her wedding ring. For a second, I thought she was going to throw it away. Instead, she held it up toward the camera. I still wear mine. I looked at the ring through the monitor. I'd already taken mine off. It sat inside a labeled evidence bag at my office, photographed for the divorce file. The same company card that had helped pay for that ring had also paid for Ryan's so-called consulting dinner. Everything eventually connected. That's your choice, I said. Then I asked, do you know where mine is? She slowly lowered her hand. The streetlight caught the pale band on her finger where the ring had shielded her skin from the sun. It was strange. A mark left behind by something that was no longer there. She stood outside my house for 9 minutes. I never opened the door. When she finally turned and walked away, her phone lit up. Even before the camera caught the glow on her face, I knew who it was. Ryan. She answered, not because she loved him more, because she'd spent years training herself to answer whenever he called. That was the night I stopped thinking of Ryan as my rival. A rival competes. Ryan consumed. Ava had spent years feeding him until he became an appetite that devoured everything. Her badge, her marriage, and soon, the last of her excuses. Thursday morning, Ava's mother came to my office carrying a casserole. That was Helen Hayes. Whenever consequences became too painful, she wrapped them in aluminum foil and called it kindness. My receptionist buzzed my office. Mrs. Hayes is here. Send her in. Helen looked older than she had at the family dinner. Her hair was neatly pinned back, but her eyes were swollen from crying. She set the casserole on my conference table like a peace offering. I figured you probably haven't been eating. I have. She nodded quietly. For almost a full minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Patrick is angry. I know. He says you're punishing the whole family. I met her eyes. I'm protecting myself from it. She twisted the strap of her purse between her fingers. Ava made terrible mistakes. But losing her career, losing her marriage. Ethan. That's a lot. I leaned back carefully. The stitches still pulled whenever I moved too quickly. Ask me what she cost me. Helen lowered her eyes. Instead of answering, I opened a folder. It wasn't evidence from the pharmacy. It was evidence from our marriage. Bank statements, loan payments, tuition receipts, medical transfers, car insurance records, credit card statements. The quiet foundation beneath the successful life everyone thought Ava had built alone. I slid the first page across the table. Ava's police academy debt, paid in full by me before we were married. Helen rested her fingertips on the paper. I slid over the next document. Patrick's medical bills after his stroke, paid through my home equity line. Ava asked me never to tell you. She said your husband was too proud. Helen's face slowly changed. She hadn't known. The next document I slid across the table was for Mason, his DUI attorney, paid by me, listed as a personal loan, never repaid. Helen stared at the page. Mason told me Ava took care of that. She did, I said. She took care of asking me. Then I placed the fourth set of records in front of her. Ryan Mercer's consulting lunches, hotel deposits, rideshare charges, and one payment labeled case prep. Every one of them had been charged to the company card I gave Ava for work-related shift expenses. Helen stared at the statements. That can't be right. Then ask her. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I wasn't enjoying this. That mattered. Revenge becomes ugly when it starts looking for applause. I didn't need Helen to applaud. I just needed her to stop showing up with casseroles and guilt. She told you I was jealous, I said quietly. What she didn't tell you was that I had been paying for the stage Ryan was standing on. Helen covered her mouth. He came back after his divorce, she whispered. Ava said he didn't have anyone. He had my wife. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry. It was the first apology anyone in that family had given me without asking for something in return. I nodded once. Thank you. She gently pushed the casserole toward me. I pushed the folder toward her instead. Take copies. Patrick deserves to know exactly what he's defending. Helen left without the casserole. By noon, Mason called Mara. He wanted to clear up a misunderstanding about the DUI loan. Mara informed him that any family financial issues would be addressed during divorce discovery if they became relevant. He hung up. 2 hours later, Patrick emailed me directly. The subject line read, "Man to man." I never opened it. Mara did. She let out a short laugh without any humor. He wants to repay the medical bills if you'll withdraw the internal affairs complaint. I looked up at the ceiling. He thinks this is just another bill. He's offering $20,000. The balance was $86,000. Mara raised an eyebrow. And he called it man to man. Forward it to internal affairs. Possible family pressure on a complainant. She did. By that evening, the Hayes family group chat had broken into smaller private conversations. The same people who had called me dramatic were now asking to see copies of receipts. The same people who had called Ryan family wanted to know why he had been driving my SUV. The same people who praised Ava as a hero were asking why her commendation had disappeared from the department website. Ryan reacted the way people like him always do when generosity finally runs out. He invented another lie. He told Ava I had been hiding money. He told Patrick I had financially trapped her. He told Mason I planned to go after the entire family unless they stood together. Then he sent Ava a screenshot from one of my company's restricted client portals. The message underneath read, "He's been storing department-related files for years. If Internal Affairs sees this, he's finished too." Ava forwarded the screenshot to her union representative. The union representative sent it to Department Legal Counsel. Department Counsel forwarded it to Mara with one simple question. Mara forwarded it to me. I looked at the screenshot. Then I zoomed into the corner. The timestamp was 2 years old. The login wasn't mine. It belonged to Ava. I remembered that night immediately. She'd been working a domestic violence case. The audio file was missing. The prosecutor had a deadline. She asked if I could help. I told her I couldn't touch department evidence without proper authorization. She said she only needed to verify a file name. I refused. Apparently, after I'd gone to sleep, she'd used the browser session I'd forgotten to log out of. Now Ryan somehow had that screenshot, which meant one of two things. Either Ava had sent it to him, or he had access to her devices. Either way, the ground beneath her shifted again. Mara immediately prepared another notice. Unauthorized system access. Potential security breach. Possible misuse of my company's network. 10 minutes after receiving it, Ava called Mara. This time there was no anger in her voice. Only exhaustion. "Ethan can't report this. It'll destroy me." Mara answered evenly. "You forwarded a restricted company screenshot to third parties. Ryan said it proved Ethan was hiding something. Ryan lied." A long silence followed. Finally, Ava whispered, "I know." Mara looked at me. I said nothing. Ava spoke again, barely above a whisper. "He keeps telling me Ethan is the enemy. But every time I listen to him, everything gets worse." Mara's voice stayed calm. "Then stop listening." Ava let out a quiet, broken laugh. I don't know how. It was the saddest thing she'd said. It was also the least useful. By that night, Ryan's desperation was impossible to hide. He drove to the Hayes house demanding Patrick pressure Ava into standing by him. Helen refused to let him inside. Mason told him to leave. Patrick, finally seeing the financial records for himself, demanded answers about the SUV and all the consulting charges. Ryan lost his temper. He yelled loudly enough for a neighbor's doorbell camera to record everything. Ava promised me Ethan would never cut us off. She said he always comes around. The neighbor sent the video to Helen. Helen sent it to me. I forwarded it to Mara. Mara forwarded the video to Internal Affairs. Another timestamp. Another piece of the truth. Ava had never imagined that every choice she made would become something she could no longer outrun. At 11:40 that night, She sent another email. I didn't know he saw you as a resource. I read it twice. Then I answered through Mara. You both did. He was just less polite about it. For the first time, Ava didn't reply. Ryan made his next move on Monday. By Tuesday, he needed a criminal defense attorney. At first glance, his plan looked clever. He anonymously mailed Internal Affairs a packet claiming I had edited the pharmacy recording. Inside was a USB drive, a printed waveform comparison, and a statement from someone claiming to be an audio technician. The file shows signs of manipulation. He had targeted my strongest piece of evidence. If he could make the recording look unreliable, Ava's report could be dismissed as conflicting memories instead of misconduct. Ryan understood just enough about evidence to attack the chain. He just didn't understand enough to beat mine. At 8:12 that morning, Lieutenant Chun called Mara. By 8:40, we were sitting in an internal affairs conference room. Chun carefully placed the USB drive on the table without touching it directly. Do you recognize this submission? No, I answered. Mara added. We request that this be treated as potential fabricated evidence. Chun nodded. We were already leaning that way. She opened another folder. Inside was the printed waveform analysis. At the bottom was the name of the supposed expert, Dale Norton. I recognized it immediately, not personally, by reputation. He was a freelance audio consultant who had lost credibility in court after exaggerating findings in a custody case. Mara noticed my reaction. You know him? I know his reputation. He sells certainty to people who don't understand audio. Chun tapped the report. He claims your recording contains an insertion gap at 8:42. It doesn't. We'll need a formal response. I opened my laptop. This wasn't an argument. It was my profession. I pulled up the original archived recording. Then the hash certificate. The automatic smartwatch backup. The cloud metadata. The phone metadata. The ambulance call log where I'd mentioned the recording before any editing could have happened. Finally, I opened the Internal Affairs submission receipt showing the file had been uploaded at 8:47 p.m. Before I even reached the hospital. Mara arranged every document in order. Original file. Submitted within minutes of the incident. Independent device backup. Matching hash values. Third-party EMS documentation confirming the recording already existed. She looked at Chun. The only way Mr. Cole could have edited this afterward would be if he somehow traveled through time while bleeding in the back of an ambulance. For just a second, Chun almost smiled. Almost. Then she played the anonymous recording Ryan had submitted. It sounded similar to mine, but it wasn't the same. Ava's line, I said Ryan first, had been clipped and buried under added background noise, making it sound vague instead of deliberate. Ryan's own words, she always comes when I call, were completely gone. In their place was a burst of static. It might have fooled people on social media. Inside an evidence room, it was hopeless. Chun looked at the department's forensic audio specialist. He listened for a few moments before speaking. The anonymous recording has been altered. Mara looked at Chun. Anonymous. Chun slid another document across the table. It was mailed from a local print center. The payment card used belongs to Ryan Mercer. There it was. Not speculation. Not suspicion. A receipt. Ryan had tried to tamper with evidence in an internal affairs investigation. And he'd paid for it with his own credit card. By 10:30, Internal Affairs requested additional investigative support. By 11:15, a financial crimes detective joined the case after Ryan's name appeared again in questionable consulting reimbursements connected to department expenses. At noon, Ryan was called in for questioning. He arrived with Ava. That told me everything. Even now. She still came whenever he called. The difference was that this time, every hallway had surveillance cameras. Every interview was recorded. Every word could become evidence. Ryan walked in looking irritated. Not afraid. Ava looked exhausted. When she saw me, she stopped. Ethan. I didn't answer. Ryan smirked. Still hiding behind lawyers? Mara replied before I could. Still mailing forged audio recordings? His expression hardened. I have no idea what you're talking about. Lieutenant Chun opened the interview room door. Mr. Mercer. Ryan walked inside. Ava started to follow him. Chun stepped in front of her. Separate interviews. Ava looked confused. I'm here to support him. No. Chen's voice stayed calm. You're the subject of a connected misconduct investigation. That single word hit harder than administrative leave ever had. Subject. Ava slowly sat in the hallway across from me. For 20 minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Did he really alter the audio? I looked at her. You tell me. I didn't know. You keep saying that after bringing him into every part of your life. She folded her hands together tightly. He told me you'd edited your recording. And you believed him. I didn't want to believe you'd destroy me. I didn't destroy the recording. Her eyes filled with tears. She fought them back. With Ava, tears had always been another way to negotiate. She'd used them with her father, with captains, with me. I didn't accept them as evidence anymore. Inside the interview room, the voices started to rise. Ryan spoke first. Then Lieutenant Chun answered in her usual calm, controlled tone. A moment later, another man's voice joined in, asking questions about payments. The moment Ava heard the word payments, she flinched. I watched everything fall into place for her. Ryan's consulting invoices, his emergency hotel stays, his so-called case research, his excuse that he was helping her build community contacts. She had approved it all because asking too many questions would have forced her to choose between the truth and what was comfortable. At 1:05 p.m., the interview room door opened. Ryan walked out, his face red with anger. He pointed at me. You set me up. Mara calmly stepped in front of my chair. Careful. Ryan turned toward Ava. She gave me that dashboard screenshot. She told me Ethan's system could be used against him. Ava stood up. What? Ryan's voice grew sharper. You did. Don't pretend you didn't. You said if Ethan pushed too far, we'd prove he wasn't clean either. Ava stared at him. I said I was afraid he had everything documented. I never told you to fabricate evidence. Ryan laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. So now it's fabrication? You were happy to let me dig when you thought it would save your badge. The hallway went quiet. Officers sitting at nearby desks looked over. Ava seemed to shrink inside her coat. There is a particular kind of pain that comes when the person you've protected explains your guilt better than your enemies ever could. Ryan had stopped pretending she was someone special. Now she was useful in a different way. She had become his cover. Lieutenant Chun stepped out behind him. Mr. Mercer, Detective Alvarez would like to speak with you regarding fraudulent evidence submissions and reimbursement records. Ryan's face changed. Am I being detained? Not at this time. Mara leaned toward me. He needs a lawyer. Ryan ignored the hint. He turned back to Ava. Tell them you approved the invoices. Ava stared at him. He pushed harder. You did. You said Ethan never checked. You told me that company card was basically yours. Ava's voice dropped to a whisper. Ryan? Stop. No. You stop. I'm not going down because your husband got jealous. There was that word again. Jealous. By now it sounded worn out, like a weapon that had been used so often it had lost its edge. Detective Alvarez stepped into the hallway. Mr. Mercer. Come with me. Ryan hesitated, as if he might simply walk away. Two officers quietly stepped closer. Nothing dramatic, just enough to close the distance. Ryan noticed. His shoulders sank. Ava watched him leave. He never looked back at her. That was the last favor he ever did for her. He left without pretending anymore. The truth was finally impossible to ignore. Chun turned toward Ava. Sergeant Hayes Cole. We need to continue your interview. Ava kept staring down the hallway where Ryan had disappeared. Then she looked at me. For the first time, she didn't ask me to save her. She already knew I wouldn't. The disciplinary hearing wasn't held in some grand courtroom. There were no flags behind Ava, no polished stage, No ceremony. No applause. Just a long conference table. A department review panel. Union representatives. Internal affairs. Attorneys. And a recording device sitting quietly in the center of the table. Ava wore a dark blazer. She had done her best to look professional. But without her uniform, without her badge, without Ryan sitting beside her. The room no longer leaned in her favor. Mara and I sat together on the witness side. I didn't look at Ava unless someone addressed me directly. Ryan wasn't there. His attorney had advised him not to appear voluntarily because the financial crimes investigation had expanded. That was the polite explanation. The honest one was simpler. Ryan had finally run out of other people's lives to hide inside. Lieutenant Chun presented the timeline. Dispatch records. Arrival times. EMS body camera footage. The hospital statement. Ryan's public social media post. The altered audio submission. The unauthorized dashboard screenshot. The reimbursement records. Each piece was presented calmly. No shouting. No speeches. That made it even harder for Ava. When consequences are spoken quietly, there's nowhere to hide. Then Chun played the recording. Not a short clip. The entire thing. The first sound was my breathing. Uneven. Painful. Then the noise inside the pharmacy. Footsteps. Ava's boots. Her voice. Ryan. Look at me. Stay with me. Then Ryan answered. Ava. I knew you'd come. The paramedic asked. Where's the patient? My own voice followed. Weaker than I remembered. Here. Then Ava's order. Check him after Ryan. Ryan took a blow to the head. The paramedic answered immediately. Sergeant. This man is actively bleeding. Ava replied. He's conscious and talking. Ryan may have a concussion. Move. The panel members looked down at the documents in front of them. None of them looked at Ava. The recording continued. Ryan's quiet voice filled the room. Sorry, Ethan. She always comes when I call. Ava slowly closed her eyes. Then my voice came through again. Please note the time. And that I asked for medical assistance before Sergeant Hayes Cole directed you away from me. The paramedic answered. Time is 8:42 p.m. Then Ava spoke one last time. Ethan. Turn that off. Lieutenant Chun stopped the recording. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried every lie Ava had tried to tell herself. Every excuse she had written into reports. Every choice she had defended. Every truth she could no longer deny. Chairman Reeves folded his hands. Sergeant Ava Hayes Cole. Do you dispute that this is your voice on the recording? Ava swallowed. No. Do you dispute that you directed EMS to treat Mr. Mercer before Mr. Cole? No. Do you dispute that your official report failed to mention that instruction? Her union representative leaned over and whispered something. Ava kept her eyes on the table. No. Reeves continued. Do you dispute bringing a prepared statement to Mr. Cole's hospital room, asking him to sign a document describing his complaint as emotional and motivated by jealousy? Her voice was barely audible. No. Do you dispute that your personal relationship with Mr. Mercer created a conflict of interest at the scene? She closed her eyes. No. Her union representative whispered again, more urgently this time. Ava slowly shook her head. She had finally realized that denying the truth had become harder than admitting it. Reeves looked down at the file in front of him. Did you believe Mr. Cole deserved less immediate medical attention because he was your husband? Ava looked up. No. Then why did you prioritize Mr. Mercer? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The real answer wasn't procedural. It wasn't tactical. And it couldn't be defended. Ryan had spent years teaching her to hear his needs before anyone else's. She had spent years believing I would always wait. She thought marriage meant I would still be there after being stepped over. Finally, she spoke. I made a personal decision during a professional moment. It was the closest she had come to telling the truth. Reeves nodded. That personal decision compromised scene integrity, medical priorities, reporting accuracy, and public trust. Ava tightened her hands together until her knuckles turned white. The panel moved on to the altered audio recording. Ava insisted she hadn't known Ryan planned to submit fabricated evidence. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. By then, it hardly mattered. She had given him access. She had shared restricted materials. She had repeated his accusations. She had allowed him to use her position as protection. Her career didn't end because she had once loved Ryan. It ended because she kept making room for him in places where there should never have been room. 3 hours later, the panel recessed. Ava stood by a hallway window. I walked to the vending machine. My pain medication had to be taken with food, and I hadn't eaten all morning. She followed me. Ethan. Mara stood about 10 feet away. I gave her a small nod. 1 minute. Ava stopped beside the humming vending machine. Her reflection looked pale in the glass. I heard myself, she said quietly. I pressed the button for a pack of crackers. They played the recording. She shook her head. No. I really heard myself. The way I talked about you. Like you were just part of the background. The crackers dropped into the tray. I bent down slowly to pick them up. The stitches had healed, but the muscles still pulled. Ava noticed me wince. Her face fell apart. I saw the blood that night, she whispered. I saw it. She stopped. Ryan looked at me. And you chose. She nodded once. A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away almost immediately, as though crying embarrassed her now. I thought you'd understand. I looked at her. That's the most honest thing you've said. Her lips trembled. I thought you'd understand anything I did. Yes, because you believed I loved you. Because I spent years proving there would never be consequences. The vending machine hummed between us. She spoke so quietly I almost missed it. Is there really no way back? I opened the crackers. No. She flinched. The words seemed to hit her physically. I haven't even received the final decision yet. You're talking about your career. I'm talking about our marriage. My answer is still no. She looked down at the empty place where her badge had once rested. Then she spoke again. Ryan's attorney says he might cooperate against me. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Her silence answered the rest. The person she had spent years protecting had finally found the prosecutor's office. Now he was ready to protect himself instead. Chairman Reeves called everyone back into the hearing room. The final decision was read without emotion. Termination. Decertification. Sustained findings for neglect of duty. False reporting. Conflict of interest. Conduct unbecoming an officer. Referral of all related materials to the prosecutor's office for further review. Ava was instructed to surrender the rest of her department property before leaving the building. Her badge was already gone. Now everything else was too. No desk assignment. No suspension. No transfer. Just gone. She sat perfectly still while the decision was read. When it was over, she turned and looked at me. I didn't give her anger. I didn't offer comfort. I gave her exactly what she had given me while I lay bleeding on the pharmacy floor. Distance. The divorce mediation took place in a glass office above a neighborhood bakery. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the vents while Ava signed away the last pieces of the life she had always assumed would still be waiting for her. She arrived with her attorney, her mother, and no wedding ring. Patrick wasn't there. Mason wasn't there. Ryan definitely wasn't there. I sat across from her beside Mara. Between us were 3 neatly stacked folders. Divorce, property, civil claims. Ava stared at the stacks of documents as if they were weapons. They weren't. They were simply consequences, organized into pages and signatures. The mediator spoke calmly. We're here to resolve as much as possible without more litigation. Mara opened the first folder. Mr. Cole's home was purchased before the marriage. It remains his sole property. Ms. Hayes has already completed her supervised property retrieval and is making no claim to it. Ava's attorney nodded. Ava quietly said, Ava, not Sergeant. Mara met her eyes. Ms. Hayes, then. Somehow, losing the title hurt even more. It left her with nothing but her name. The mediator moved on. Vehicles. Mara continued. The Denali belongs to Cole Certified Records. Her access has been permanently revoked. Ms. Hayes keeps her personal sedan, along with the remaining loan in her name. Ava looked at me. You know I can't afford those payments now. I stayed silent. Mara answered for me. My client is not responsible for debts incurred after the separation. Ethan. Ava started. Mara gently raised a hand. All communication goes through counsel. Ava's attorney touched her arm, and she leaned back without another word. The next file covered finances. The joint account had been funded mostly by me, and our household expenses had already been separated. Ava's personal savings were limited, while her legal bills continued to grow. Then came the list of unauthorized company card charges. Ryan's hotels, Ryan's rideshares, Ryan's meals, Ryan's so-called consulting expenses. The total came to $43,620. Ava's attorney let out a slow breath. We dispute intent. Mara remained calm. We're willing to discuss a repayment schedule instead of filing an immediate civil action. Ava looked up at me. You're suing me? I'm recovering company funds, I replied. That card was for us, she said. No, I answered. It was for work expenses. Ryan was never part of the job. She pressed her lips together and looked away. The mediator quickly moved to the next issue. Civil claims. Mara spoke evenly. Mr. Cole reserves the right to pursue claims related to witness intimidation, attempted coercion of a statement, reputational damage, and emotional distress resulting from the incident and the false allegations that followed. Ava's attorney requested a private caucus, and we split into separate rooms. Through the glass wall, I watched Ava sitting with her head lowered while her attorney quietly explained her options. Helen sat beside her, holding her hand. For years, Helen had looked at me as the man fortunate enough to marry into their family. Now she looked at me with the eyes of a mother who knew I wasn't coming back to rescue her daughter. Mara sat beside me. You're handling this well. I know. You don't have to keep watching. Yes, I said. I do. She didn't ask why. I needed to watch the truth finish unfolding. Ava had always been strongest while moving, wearing her uniform, commanding scenes, giving orders, crossing rooms with confidence. Now she sat perfectly still, held in place by paperwork. 20 minutes later, everyone returned. Ava's attorney presented a proposal. Ms. Hayes agrees to a no-contest divorce. She waives any claim to the house. She accepts responsibility for half of the unauthorized charges, with the understanding that Mr. Mercer should be responsible for the remainder. She agrees to a non-disparagement clause, submits a written statement confirming Mr. Cole never obstructed police work, withdraws her previous allegations, and agrees to cooperate in any claims against Mr. Mercer. Mara looked at me. I nodded. We have a few additions, she said. Ava's attorney braced himself. Full repayment responsibility for the company charges remains joint and several between Ms. Hayes and Mr. Mercer until the debt is recovered. Mr. Cole may seek recovery from either party. Ms. Hayes will also sign an affidavit acknowledging that she attempted to obtain Mr. Cole's signature on a pre-written statement while he was receiving medical treatment. Finally, Ms. Hayes will acknowledge in writing that no marital reconciliation is being discussed. Ava's head snapped up. That last part is humiliating. For the first time that day, I looked directly at her. No, I said. It's accurate. Tears filled her eyes. Why does that have to be written? Because every time consequences caught up with you, you hid behind the word wife. She recoiled as though I'd struck her. Mara slid the document toward her. You don't have to sign it. We can take this to court. Ava's attorney leaned over and whispered something. Helen squeezed her daughter's hand. Ava picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the page. I remembered the hospital, the statement she had tried to make me sign, the words she had written for me. Now she had to sign her own. She signed one page, then another, then another. With every signature, Another piece of the life she had taken for granted became official history. When the paperwork was finished, the mediator asked, "Is there anything else?" Ava looked at me. 5 minutes alone. Before I could answer, Mara did. "No." Ava's voice cracked. "Please, I signed everything." "That wasn't something you could buy," I said. She gripped the pen until her knuckles turned white. "I lost my badge. Ryan blames me. My father thinks I destroyed our family name. The department won't even let me clean out my locker without supervision. I know I deserve consequences. But you're acting like I never meant anything." I slowly pushed back my chair. The room fell silent. "I loved you enough to build the quiet parts of your life," I said. "You loved me like quiet things could never break." Her face crumpled, not into dramatic sobs, but into the exhausted expression of someone finally realizing that some things, once broken, can never be put back together. Defeat settled over her face. I turned to the mediator. "We're done." Outside the building, Ava followed me onto the sidewalk while Mara stayed close beside me. "Ethan," Ava called. I stopped. It was a bright afternoon. People walked past carrying coffee and fresh bread, completely unaware of what had just ended. Life kept moving. Ava stood about 3 feet away. No badge. No wedding ring. No Ryan. "I don't know who I am without the job," she said. I believed her, but that didn't make it my responsibility. "You'll figure it out." She swallowed hard. "I don't know who I am without you." I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "That was something you should have figured out before you stepped over me." She covered her mouth, fighting back tears. My phone buzzed. Mara checked hers at the same time. It was a message from Lieutenant Chun. "Ryan Mercer has entered a cooperation interview. He is claiming Ms. Hayes approved the disputed reimbursements and encouraged the use of altered evidence. Prosecutors have expanded their review." Mara showed me the message. Ava caught enough of the screen to understand what it meant. Her knees seemed to weaken. "He's saying what?" Mara lowered the phone. "Talk to your attorney." Ava looked at me as though I could stop what was coming. Couldn't. More importantly, I wasn't going to. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. Just before I got in, Ava said my name one last time. Not in the voice of a sergeant. Not in the voice of a wife. Just a woman watching the last door close. I got into the car. Mara sat beside me, and the driver pulled away. In the side mirror, I saw Ava standing alone on the sidewalk, clutching the signed papers while strangers walked around her. That was the point of no return. It wasn't the badge. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the divorce. It was the moment she realized my silence no longer meant I was staying. 6 months later, Ryan Mercer pleaded guilty to 2 charges. Not every count held. That's how real life works. But enough of them did. He admitted to submitting fraudulent reimbursement claims and providing fabricated evidence during an administrative investigation. At sentencing, he avoided prison because his attorney argued that he had cooperated, had no prior felony convictions, and had acted under emotional circumstances. What he couldn't avoid was restitution. He couldn't avoid probation. He couldn't avoid the civil judgment Mara won against him for unauthorized use of my company vehicle, damage to my reputation, and misuse of company funds. Most of all, he couldn't avoid becoming exactly what men like him fear most. Not a villain. A liability. No police department wanted him as a consultant. No law firm wanted him anywhere near a case. No nonprofit wanted his name attached to its board. The same people who once called him charming started using different words instead. Troubled. Complicated. Unfortunate. Ava was never charged with a felony. Her mother thanked God for that every day. But the prosecutor referred her admissions to the certification board. The department upheld her termination, and her law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. After her appeal failed, even her union stopped returning her calls. She lost her badge twice. The first time when she placed it on the table. The second time on paper. The second loss was quieter, and it lasted forever. Our divorce became final that spring. There was no courtroom drama, no emotional speeches, just a judge reviewing paperwork, asking the required questions, and signing the order that officially turned us into strangers connected only by a case number. Ava appeared by video. I sat beside Mara in the courtroom. When the judge asked if reconciliation was possible, Ava looked toward the camera for a brief moment. I could see the old instinct rise inside her. The urge to explain, to ask for one more chance, to make private pain soften public consequences. Then her attorney gently touched her arm off camera. Ava lowered her eyes. "No, Your Honor." The judge looked at me. "No, Your Honor," I replied. The order was entered at 10:17 a.m. 5 years of marriage ended in less than 12 minutes. After the hearing, Ava waited outside the courthouse, even though she knew I wouldn't meet with her alone. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a folder. Her hair was shorter now. She looked thinner, not broken in the dramatic way people imagine. Worse than that, ordinary consequences had made her an ordinary person. Mara spotted her first. "Do you want to leave through the side exit?" she asked. "No." We walked out the front. Ava stood as we approached. "I'm not here to ask you to come back." "That's good," I said. She nodded, accepting the answer. "I wanted to give you this." She held out the folder. Mara took it before I could. Inside was the repayment schedule she had signed, along with a cashier's check for the first installment. It wasn't enough to fix anything. It was enough to prove her attorney had convinced her that reality wasn't negotiable anymore. "I sold my sedan," Ava said quietly. "I'm living with my mother now. My dad still barely speaks to me." I didn't answer. Silence has a way of making guilty people keep talking. Ryan tried calling me after he was sentenced. I looked at her. "Did you answer?" "No." This time there was no pride in her voice, only exhaustion. "He said we were both ruined because of you." I used to believe that too. She swallowed hard. But during the appeal, I listened to the recording again. I heard myself telling the paramedics to treat him first. I heard Ryan laughing at you. And I heard you, while you were bleeding, calmly documenting the exact time. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. "That's when I realized you weren't trying to destroy me. You were the only person in that room telling the truth." Mara quietly stepped back, giving the moment space without giving Ava any more access to me. Ava looked into my eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," I said. Her lips trembled, but she stayed composed. "I am sorry." There was no request hidden inside that apology. It was honest. That made it cleaner, but it didn't make it enough. "I hope one day you become the kind of person who means those words before there are consequences," I told her. She nodded. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away or make a scene. She simply let it fall. Then she asked the question she'd been carrying all this time. "Did you ever love me after that night?" I looked out across the courthouse steps where people walked in carrying folders and walked out with lives forever changed. "I loved the person I believed you were before that night," I said. "The recording introduced me to the person making the choices." She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was nothing left to argue. I walked past her and she didn't follow. That mattered. Maybe she'd finally learned that not every goodbye is meant to become a chase. Some doors close because they should. That afternoon, I returned to my office. Behind the glass, the evidence vault hummed quietly. My staff had left a small envelope on my desk. Inside was the final internal affairs release notice and a copy of Ava's decertification record. It was now public record. I didn't frame it. I didn't celebrate it. I scanned it, archived it, labeled it, and closed the file. Hayes Cole Incident Final. Then I changed the file name to Hayes Incident Final. Cole no longer belonged there. That evening I went home. The house was quiet. For months after the pharmacy, silence had felt like the aftermath of sirens, the pause before another lawyer's email. Now it felt different. Felt like peace. My kitchen, my table, my keys. The ceramic dish by the front door was gone. It was the one where Ava used to leave her badge every night. I'd thrown it away after the divorce, not out of anger, but because it was chipped. I cooked dinner badly and ate it anyway. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the transcript appeared. It was Ryan. His voice sounded thinner now, stripped of its usual confidence. Ethan. Look, things got out of hand. Ava turned on me too. I'm trying to rebuild. Maybe we can settle the civil judgment for less. Call me back. I forwarded the voicemail to Mara, then blocked the number. A second voicemail came from a different phone. I blocked that one too. Men like Ryan survive by finding doors that aren't locked. I finally learned how to lock mine. Ava reached out one last time that winter. Not with a phone call. A handwritten letter arrived. No perfume. No dramatic envelope. Just paper. She wrote that she was working security at a private company under supervision. She wasn't a police officer anymore. She didn't carry a gun. She didn't give orders. She wrote that her father had finally started letting her visit on Sundays. She wrote that her mother still reminded her to eat. She wrote that Ryan had been ordered to pay restitution and had already missed his second payment. Near the end, she wrote one sentence that stayed with me. I lost my badge because I forgot the badge was never meant to protect my feelings. That was true. Then she wrote another. I lost you because I believed love meant you would always stay on the floor waiting while I finished saving someone else. That was true too. I never answered. Some truths don't need a reply. I filed the letter in the legal archive, not in my personal drawer. That was where it belonged. Ava lost her badge, her career, her marriage, access to her home, her public reputation, her family's unquestioning loyalty, and the man who had quietly held her life together. She lost them because she turned betrayal into an official decision, then tried to hide it behind authority. Ryan lost the borrowed importance he had worn for years. He lost the SUV, the steady flow of money, the hero story he built around himself, the consulting work, and the protection Ava had always given him. He became a man buried under debt, with a criminal record, a damaged reputation, and a name no serious organization wanted attached to it. As for me, I didn't become cruel. I simply became unavailable. There's a difference. Cruelty would have meant wanting Ava to suffer the way I had. Being unavailable meant letting the facts speak for themselves and refusing to soften the truth afterward. The last time I walked past Marlo Pharmacy, the broken display rack had been replaced. A new security sticker was on the front door. The cashier was back behind the counter. She noticed me through the window and gave me a small wave. I waved back. For a moment, I looked at the floor near the cold medicine aisle. It was spotless now. No blood. No sirens. No wife stepping over me. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Mara. Final restitution payment from Hayes received. Ryan still delinquent. Enforcement proceeding. I replied with one word. Proceed. Then I slipped my phone back into my pocket and kept walking. I never looked back at the pharmacy. I had already given the recording to Internal Affairs. The badge was gone. The marriage was gone. And the version of me that would have waited for Ava to choose me was gone too. Unlike her badge, unlike Ryan's lies, and unlike the life she thought she could keep after stepping over my blood, I wasn't something she could appeal.